Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Susanne, I'm an indie author, and this is my author devlog for Vampire Project. In these videos, I want to give you a behind-the-scenes look at my creative process and also talk a little bit about my story. Last time I promised that I'd be reading you the prologue, and if you just want to hear that, skip right ahead to the next video, because I'm going to be talking first a little bit about beginnings and why they're so hard, and all the trouble that they've been giving me with this story. And I want to take you through the journey of the first beginning I ever wrote for this story, and then the different iterations, and the decisions, the choices that went into progressing the story until we end up with the prologue that I'm going to be reading in the next video. So the first iteration of Vampire Project was actually as a manga. And in the manga, you had an omniscient narrator in the beginning introducing all the different areas of this world, the political background, and then also introducing a lot of different characters that were all converging in this one area at the same time. And this was chaotic, even in manga form. But as I changed this into a novel, it became unusable because there's too many characters in too many areas all being introduced at the same time. And when you lack the visual elements of the manga, it's hard to tell them apart and make them distinct. And so that needed to go. And the second problem with this beginning was that it started a bit late in the story. So I would have had to tell a lot of flashbacks to give you an idea of the backstories of these characters and the background, everything that's been going on up until this point. And I think flashbacks are great, but they only work in small doses. If you do huge flashbacks all the time, you risk that it's going to be a drag on your story. And so I didn't want to do that. And then the third change I made was concerning the tone of the story. In the manga form, and I'm a little bit sad about losing this, I was able to add like all these fun little, side comic moments that you can do in manga form that don't really work in novel form. But instead, I went and I embraced the horror elements a little bit more, and I made it darker. And I think this worked in the novel form, as we have a darker tone, we have a more serious tone, but I think this is going to be good. So the second iteration for Vampire Project is what I call the German draft. It was the first novel I ever finished, and I'd written it completely in German. And unfortunately, I started the beginning here with a rookie mistake. I said it at the end of a final battle of this war, and all the interesting stuff had just happened, and we just missed it. And so we were stuck with the boring parts. We were stuck with characters who were happy they'd survived, and they were meeting up, and they were saying their goodbyes. And so that's obviously not an ideal start. The stakes are really low. We're at the low point of the tension, and we haven't seen these characters before, so we don't really care that they're saying their goodbyes. We don't really care about their social interactions here, their emotional stakes, because we weren't there for when the story happened. And the second problem would have been that this, again, would have necessitated adding a lot of flashbacks to give you a few pointers to the background story that had just happened that we'd missed, but also the background story for Afia, the main character. So this wasn't gonna really work. And since I decided to change the entire story, rewrite it in English, I thought that was a great moment to make some changes. But there were some interesting things that happened in the second iteration that I wanted to explore a bit more. And the first of this was Ulongdan emerged as a location. It'd been really more of just a point on a map in the manga edition of the story. But here in this first scene, we got to see it. We got to see it in a nice contrast to where the rest of the book took place, which was the desert continent, Afian's home continent. But so Ulongdan was just this interesting little location with a lot of mist, a lot of fog, mysterious dark forests, and, this battle that had just happened. And I think there were also some interesting cultural aspects that I wanted to explore a bit more. And then the second factor that I thought was interesting was there were two characters that had made a first appearance here that weren't in the manga version of the story. The first of these was An Yin, who's now a main character and a viewpoint character for the story. In this version, he was a bit older than he is in my current book. He was about 35 to 40-ish. He was an established clan leader and sort of this mentor toward Afia. And the second character was the seer, who is the unofficial queen of Oolong Dan. She's a very powerful character. She can see the future, and she also had this mentor capacity toward Afia in this scene. And so these two characters met up with Afia, gave her a nice send-off, and then she went home to Verdanis, to the desert continent. And that's where I, at this point, thought the adventure began, the real story happened. And we're still going to see this. That's going to be in the second book of the trilogy, for which I've written a first draft that's sitting in my drawer right now. But for my third iteration of the story, that when I was writing this in English, I wanted to explore Oolong Dan a bit more, and I wanted to give more screen time to these two characters. And so I took us back further in the story to get rid of these flashbacks. And so that's where we get the third iteration, the third beginning point of the story. Okay, so we switched from German to English, and now we get a lot more drafts. This is really where the meat of my world building happened. We get a lot more layered characters, and we get to see a lot more details of Oolong Dan. But the first scene very much stayed consistent through all these drafts, and it's Afia's arrival on Oolong Dan. She's a little bit shipwrecked. She doesn't really know where she is, and her initial goals are she wants to survive, obviously, and maybe not kill too many people. And these initial goals keep her distant from Oolong Dan, from the people of Oolong Dan, until she meets Anyin. And she saves his life, and then he serves as sort of a window into his culture. He introduces her to his culture. But we still very much kept this outsider perspective with Afia. There's a lot of places I noticed that I couldn't take the reader because Afia couldn't go there. There's a lot of social interactions we didn't get to see because she doesn't get to see those. And all of her interactions with people other than Anyin feel a little bit samey in that people are suspicious of her and hostile to her because there's a sacred law that says you have to kill vampires on sight. So no one's really too pleased to see her and have her there. And so to remedy that, Anyin had to hijack the story, and he turned from just a second main character into my second viewpoint character. He also now had this internal dilemma of people are very much disagreeing with him supporting Afia and breaking sacred law. And he is supposed to be, the clan leader's son. He's supposed to be a role model for his people. He's supposed to protect them from the dangerous vampire. But now he finds himself protecting the dangerous vampire from them. And one of the people that I think also became more interesting with this change was actually the seer, who had been a supportive character initially to Afia and also to Anyin, and now acts as an antagonist to this entire dilemma because she wrote that sacred law, and Anyin is breaking it. These changes really worked for the story. They made Oolong Dan a more vibrant place. They gave us people disagreeing with each other, and they still have to all work for the same goal eventually because war is coming to Oolong Dan, and they need Anyin to be the clan leader's son, to live up to his role and to protect his people. So they can't just go against him too much, but they can very much disagree with him, whether that's because they wrote sacred law or because they're a family member of Anyin and they're very worried about him. They can come from different points, but still arrive at that conclusion and still be supportive of Anyin in one moment and very much working against him in the next. And I think so we got a lot more layered characters because Anyin became layered, they became layered. And we see him grow as a character from a teenager who wants to live up to their expectations and wants to adhere to the law and who wants to be a role model to someone who stands up for his own convictions. And I'd always thought of Anyin as a sort of character, as a very honorable character, someone who is steadfast in his convictions, who's an idealist, who wants to make the world a better place if you want. But now you get to see it. You as the reader get to see it. So I think that was a great change. And I think that this deep dive we do into this moment in time on Ulangdan, into his family, his clan, his town as these events are happening, this deep dive into Ulangdan culture is a great strength of the story now. But at the same time, I got a little bit concerned because it shifted the focus away from the larger story that I wanted to tell, that I'm going to tell in the rest of the books, that we didn't get to see anymore, that this was a bigger story, that there were other forces at work beyond the borders of Ulangdan. And so I added the prologue to, shift that focus back onto that, to give a different sort of promise to the reader. And so in the next video, I'm going to read you this prologue, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it works and why I'm going to probably keep it as the very first scene of the book. That's it on beginnings. If you just want to hear the prologue now, that's the next video, so skip right ahead. Comment below if you have a favorite beginning of a story that you would like to share. Subscribe to be notified when the next video drops. And if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends and give it a like. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.